unfortunate news, which is really the big takeaway here.
Yeah.
Anthony Duclair gets hurt, and he's going to be out a while here, as Lou Lamoriello didn't sound too confident in that. He's not going to miss the entirety of the season, but you think he will?
If Lou Lamoriello says it's going to be a long time, it's going to be like a decade. Like how many times has Lou come out there? It's like, he's just got a little scratch and he's out for 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Right? Rarely do guys come back early with Lou Lamoriello. Rarely. Because if you have time, you take it type of thing. If it takes all season for him to get better, it's going to take all season for him to get better. Remember Anders Lee when he got hurt? Weren't we told like he might come back for the playoffs and just never did?
He tore his ACL, which that didn't come out until after. I did it off my very good medical knowledge here, which is a Google search of how long does a groin take to heal. I got a couple variables here for you. Ready?
Okay. Yeah.
So mild or moderate strain, which I don't think it was based off how he reacted, 4 to 8 weeks. Severe strain is several months, and complete tears, which is surgery, 3 months. Oof. So that's a long time. But we're talking like, I don't know, January, February return?
At the earliest, yeah. And that's if everything goes right along the way and he heals like quicker than you would anticipate type of thing.
Mitch, I'm gonna say it. This is, you know what this is setting up for?
What's that?
Anthony Duclair is basically a trade deadline acquisition now. That's gonna be the spin in like 4 months. In February 14th. That's what we're gonna get.
Getting a brand new player, we didn't have to trade anything for him. It was future considerations, which is a point to a degree. But like as you're obviously alluding to here, like that's not what we were going for. That was what we got in the offseason. Great, you bring him in, cool. We wanted even more at that point. Certainly, when it comes to the trade deadline, not the only thing we don't just want Anthony Duclair back. We want that and more.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right in terms of judging on the more severe side of things, not only because of Lou's comments, but just when you saw him get off the ice. Like he wasn't, usually players are on the ice and like they're wriggling around in pain, like, oh God. He went down on the ice and it didn't look like much. It wasn't from contact. It's just kind of weird angle that he was on. And he was on the ice and you can see it in his face, obviously in pain, but just saying like, I know what this is and this is not good. I'm not even going to try. And then he's getting off the ice and he's putting no weight on his right leg. You can see the foot was up the entire way towards the bench. Not a good sign. It's going to be quite a while before he comes back.
Yeah, I'm going to say January, the earliest.
Yeah, that makes sense. It really does. In terms of even just a conservative timeline, because we have to remember it's Lou Lamoriello we're talking about here.
Makes me nervous, but they are going to clearly have to do something, and we'll get into that in the second half of this conversation on the open here. But just for Duclair, it stinks because 5 games, but he had 3 points in 5 games, 2 goals. He looked good, like the top line was working and looking good, and that was the point. Like the Islanders brought Duclair in because they thought, hey, like this is someone who might actually be able to complement what Matthew Barzal and Bo Horvat are doing. And now you're right back to Simon Holmstrom on the top line, just like 5 games into your season.
Yeah, exactly. And Duclair was doing relatively well. 3 points, 5 games. Like you're looking at, what is that in terms of pace? Like 50 some odd points, 3 over 5 times 82. Yeah, 50 points for someone who's being paid $3 million. Remember, this isn't an advertised top line elite player. This is, you're trying to get a little bit more out of him than what you're paying him for, which is what he was doing.
Yeah.
And the 20 shot attempts, that's the one that I look at. 20 shot attempts over 5 games. That's 300 and some odd shot attempts over a year. Obviously, he probably doesn't pace out to that over the entire 82-game season. But so far, what he and that line were doing was not only providing with production, but generating those chances, or at least keeping the puck in the offensive zone, which is what we wanted to see. So it was working with what Anthony Duclair was doing. And now 5 games in, he's out for months. Potentially.
Yeah, which is just, again, unbelievably frustrating. It was a good start for Duclair, and there's someone who unfortunately had a bad injury a couple of years ago, where he only played in 20 games for Florida in 22-23. Before the season before is when he had that monster 31-goal season. Last year was his first year back essentially from that, had 42 points and 24 goals on, most of the year spent on a really crappy San Jose team, goes to Tampa Bay, puts up really good numbers. And, as we discussed in the offseason, really good value deal for the Islanders and Anthony Duclair. And they were early, obviously, in the sample size, but it looked like they were cashing in on that investment. And unfortunately, he's going to be on the shelf now for a few months.
Yeah. And as we alluded to during the year, and it's not just us. I'm not saying like we were the only ones to say this. There's not a whole lot of depth coming up to take that spot. We were even just seeing with Max Siplikov on the second line, who, while has started the year pretty hot, has cooled down quite a bit since then. Hasn't looked that great over the last 2 games. He's fine, but like some of the penalties he's taking is clearly he's struggling with the pace of the game now.
Yeah, it's gonna take time, and there's gonna be ebbs and flows. I've been happy with Siplikov, and I'm sure same thing. I didn't take it as you were saying otherwise, but that's expected for someone who has 5 NHL games in his career.
Right. And if he was going to be the second line center, second line winger, because there wasn't a better option, we're up shit creek without a paddle now in terms of the top line. Because if you didn't have a second line winger that you really favored, you don't have one for the top line. That is going to give you Duclair or more. You just don't.
No, they don't. Can I give you the lines they ran at morning skate today? And I think that might be a good jumping off point into where this is trending. It was Holmstrom, which pointed out that he's back on the top line. Holmstrom, Horvat, Barzal, Siplikov, Nelson, Palmieri, Lee, Peugeot, Zizekas, third line, so slightly new look third line, and Martin, McLean, Wallstrom. Now, Matt Martin is still on the PTO. He's not going to be signed, so Matt Martin is not going to be, don't panic, Matt Martin is not going to be playing on the fourth line tomorrow night or tonight, depending on when you're listening to this. But someone's going to get a call up, and I would imagine they're likely sliding into a bottom 6 spot. And either Zizekas goes back down and whoever this is plays on the third line, or Zizekas stays and someone's on the fourth line. What do you think the corresponding move is? Obviously, they have a established NHLer in Pierre Engvall, who is sitting down there. Is that going to be the quick call up? Mitch is shaking his head no right now already.
Just think of the money, right?
Well, if he's
a guy making $3 million,
if Duclair goes on to LTIR, doesn't that offset it essentially?
Correct. Yes. Right. We hadn't mentioned the LTIR, so you're right. That would offset it. You'd still have $2 million because you have $1 million in space right now, as it stands. Not moving Anthony Duclair to LTIR, and moving Anthony Duclair to LTIR would also mean that you're not allowed to bank. You're no longer allowed to bank money for the trade deadline, which would suck doubly for us, because you're losing Duclair to bring up Engvall, who hasn't really done much at the AHL level. Now, I haven't watched a ton of Bridgeport games. From what I've watched, he's not been great. If you like that, make sure to subscribe to Up the Turnpike on Patreon for more exclusive New York Islanders content.